Football Outsiders live stream. Today is Monday, December 13th. I'm Aaron Schatz, editor in chief of Football Outsiders, as always on Mondays, joined by Ian O'Connor from EdjSports to recap week 14. Want to welcome all of our audience live streaming on YouTube and Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook, or if you're listening to us after the fact on the Football Outsiders Podcast Network. Please make sure you subscribe to the show on your platform of choice. And of course, FO Plus subscriptions still on sale, 99 cents a week. So get it while we've got it. All of our advanced stats and splits, fantasy football research data, picks against the spread, and more. Go to footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. So week 14 sucked for a long time. The early window was a lot of blowouts and just ugly games between bad teams, and it really wasn't exciting. And then it looked like the late window was going to be blowouts too. And then around 7 o'clock, everything got awesome, and we ended up with two games simultaneously in overtime, both with heavy playoff ramifications. So let's talk first about the game of the week, which was the Buffalo Bills and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The epic comeback for the Bills to force overtime, came all the way back from being down, I believe, 27-10 at one point, to tie it, force overtime, but Tom Brady won it in overtime. Yes.
Yeah, it ended up being only the third most impactful play of the weekend, but it was a great play. The newly, re-signed Rashad Perriman, who was just there a couple years ago, I think, with Jameis.
He's bounced around a lot of different teams. He was supposed to be big in Detroit this year, and then he never made the team. And then he was on Tampa Bay's practice squad, and then they've signed him back sometime in the last couple of weeks. But
yeah. Yeah, he was, if I remember correctly, I think it was kind of a late season fantasy playoff hero a couple years ago with Jameis late. But yeah, he's back with the Bucs, and he took a pass from Tom Brady. Only 5 minutes, 42 seconds left in the overtime. So about halfway in, 3rd and 3 on their own 42. The Bills looking to get a big stop to try and get that ball back. But he took a pass coming across from left to right, caught it, and went upfield 58 yards for the touchdown. Obviously, the game winner, walk off, a 36% increase in win probability for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the rest is history in that one.
And we should point out the 36% increase in game-winning chance means that the Bucs were already favored to win the game when they made that pass. Because even though they were on their own half of the field, they had the ball. They were in okay situation, 3rd and 3. Field goal wins the game at that point. So they were the favorite at that point.
They were the favorites, and it's worth pointing out too that is included, 50% is included for those of you watching that don't know. We do give 50% for a tie, so it counts as half of a win. So the closer it gets into the end of overtime, the closer and closer those numbers get to 50, with the likelihood of a tie as opposed to dropping down to 0. Yeah, Tampa Bay was still the favorites there, like you said, Aaron. Pretty good situation, 3rd and 3, but with that offense, that's a pretty good conversion rate, I would think, and they converted it for that and some. As we said, going from 64 up to 100%.
So the Bills managed to make the big comeback and make it a close game, but Sean McDermott, who has in the past been very aggressive for an NFL head coach, but made a lot of small errors that piled up throughout this game, yes?
Yeah, he came into this game, he was 5th in our coach rankings overall, only 15th in CCI, which is the 4th down decision-making metric, was 12th a week prior, last week, dropped a few spots, but typically is pretty good. And this was actually a game that in our coach rankings video last week, Katie George and I pointed out this was one of our head coach matchups to watch because of the fact that, Arians overall isn't terrible. He's 15th or 14th overall, but 29th in CCI, a guy that just doesn't, to be fair, it seems like the Bucs aren't really in a ton of 4th down scenarios where they should go for it. But when they are, he's way more conservative than many other coaches or most other coaches. At 29th in CCI, I mentioned Sean McDermott 15th. Not great like he has been, but still middle of the pack. And it came down to, there were 3 decisions that don't show up in our top 10 or our top 5s at all this week, but they're still notable. The first one was early on, down 10-0, about 5 minutes into the second quarter. chooses to kick a field goal on 4th and goal at the 3. Cost them 2.2% in pre-snap win probability. Again, not a huge number. The Bucs were already favorites coming into this game, so a 10-0 lead. Get into the second quarter, got them up to where it would take a lot to make that a really big decision. But still, that's an important one. They cut it to 10-3, but ended up getting down 24-3 later in the third quarter, or later in the game, down the third quarter, down 21. Got 4th and 2 on his own 45. He chooses to call a fake punt, which we agree with the decision to go for it. It's only about a 0.5% increase, but it didn't fool anyone in Tampa Bay. I think it ended up being like a 3-yard loss. But in that situation, there is often something to the element of surprise. I think we've mentioned that maybe a couple times on here. But when you've got an offense, the offense isn't great, but you've got a quarterback with Josh Allen that can run the ball well, that's mobile. He's got those weapons and Stephon Diggs and Dawson Knox and Cole Beasley out there. He's got guys that can make plays. I would much rather have the ball in his hands than to put it in my punt team's hands to pick up that first down, especially already down 24-3. You really have nothing to lose at that point. They were down pretty low, and this was only, I said, a 0.6% increase in pre-snap win probability. So really, you've got nothing to lose. If you're going to go for it anyway with a fake, you might as well leave your offense on the field. Didn't convert. Tampa ended up getting a field goal. It's 27-3. And then they got the ball back. They were able to score a touchdown, but then it was 24. They got the ball back. It was 24-10. They faced 4th and 3 after scoring a touchdown. Again, from their own 45-yard line, only a yard further back, and we're later in the game. And if he's willing to run a fake punt, then you would think he'd at least be willing to go for it now. Doesn't. Chooses to punt in this situation. It's a 1.4% loss in pre-snap win probability. And Tampa gets the field goal. The Bills, you mentioned, are able to get the comeback to tie it and force overtime. But those decisions added up to really a game that they could have won that in regulation. There's no guarantee they convert those, but you would expect them to convert at least one of those, if not 2 or all of them. And this maybe wouldn't even have come down to overtime. So really surprising from Sean McDermott. Like you said, you think he's been a little bit more aggressive recently, or at least in recent years, but the last couple of weeks have been kind of a rough week and dropped him down a little bit.
Yeah, the other thing is that he failed the go for 2 down 11 test, which is similar to the go for 2 down 8 test. When you need 2 touchdowns and a field goal, it's similar to when you need 2 touchdowns. After you score that first touchdown, you should go for 2. Like, this is one of the things that analytics has made really, really clear, and McDermott did not do it.
Yeah, so really surprising. We actually did have a couple teams that did the down 9 go for 2. The Ravens did it. They failed. Were able to get a touchdown and then set them up with they knew they needed a touchdown and a field goal, set them up for that situation, recovering the onside kick, which we'll get to. But then the Panthers were about to. They had a false start on their 2-point conversion. They weren't able to, or ended up kicking the field goal. But both coaches made the right, and those were just minutes apart in real times. Yeah, Sean McDermott.
The extra point, and the Panthers made the right decision in that going for 2 was the right decision. Mm-hmm. And then when it was knocked back 5 yards, kicking the extra point became the right decision.
Yeah.
So another big back and forth game from yesterday afternoon happened simultaneously with the Bucs and Bills. Bengals. Rough go of it offensively, heading into the fourth quarter. They were down 20-6, and then the LSU connection of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase got awesome. And first, they brought it to a 1-score game at 20-13. So let's talk about the crucial error that Kyle Shanahan made, giving the ball back to the Bengals with just a few minutes remaining.
Yeah, this was a really fun time during the day. Like you said, you had the 2 games going simultaneously over time. Red zone was flipping back and forth from each game. The LSU connection had been kind of dormant for a while since that Baltimore game where Jamar Chase went off. Kind of erupted this game with 2 touchdowns. Could have been 3. Jamar Chase just barely dropped one in the end zone. But, yeah, Shanahan almost ruined this one. Or I guess he kind of did because the Bengals ended up tying the game. But down only 7. The 49ers had the ball 4th and 2 on their own 37, 2:47 left. So Shanahan came into this game 8th in our coach rankings. He was, I think, 9th in CCI. No, sorry, he was further down. It was Kingsbury. I'm thinking of. He's 17th in CCI, so only middle of the pack. He's had a handful of kind of questionable decisions. We had the 4th and 2, I think, or 4th and goal at the 2 against the Jaguars on the opening drive, kicked a field goal. Ended up not being a close game, but he hasn't been as conservative or hasn't been as aggressive as he should have been, as he has been in the past. He's kind of goes back and forth. But this one, less than 3 minutes left, up 7, choosing to punt was a 5.2% error, second worst fourth down error of the week. And this one, we talked about it on the podcast we did earlier here this morning that I did with Scott Brown here at EdjSports. And when it gets down into the end of the game like that, the model, some people say our model is a little bit more aggressive. It does a really good job with those late game scenarios. There are some people that say, the late game models are very hard to do. You can't really get them right. Well, we, over the years, really feel strongly in ours that we've gotten this one right, because the way we kind of talk through it is it knows that coaches act differently in the running down at the end of the game. So instead of just assuming 30 or 40 seconds is going to run off like a normal play throughout the game, running down the play clock, it knows that coaches are going to be more aggressive, but also they're going to run plays where they're able to get out of bounds and stop the clock after, with a 5-6 second play, or they're going to hurry up and get up to the line and be able to snap it within 20 seconds. So it knows that the other team is going to have to be aggressive if they punt. And in a situation, even if San Francisco doesn't get it, worst case scenario, which is going to be difficult, is the Bengals score a touchdown, score a 2-point conversion to take the lead. You probably still have some time left if you're Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. They still had a couple timeouts. I actually think they might have had all 3 of their timeouts in this situation. No, so they had just 2 timeouts left. But still, 2 timeouts, the 2-minute warning. If you don't get it and the Bengals score a touchdown, an extra point, and tie it up, you've still likely got time to kick a game-winning field goal. The way it turned out, they punted. Cincinnati was forced to they punted. Cincinnati went down and tied the game. Being like I said, a 5.2% error, forcing overtime. San Francisco had a chance to win it, but couldn't connect. Got it in overtime, but that's a situation where with that team, the way they run the ball, would like to run the ball. George Kittle had a huge game. It seems like if they would have thrown it to him, he would have caught it no matter where the pass was thrown. If it was 20 feet over his head, he'd have jumped and caught it. But just a really very conservative decision from Shanahan, which isn't really surprising given kind of the way he's been lately.
So Burrow threw it to Chase again, touchdown. Like you said, Robbie Gould missed a field goal as time expired, so overtime. Let's talk about kicking a field goal in overtime, because the Bengals got the ball first, made it to 4th and 7 on the San Francisco 23, and chose to kick a field goal to take the lead. Now, on the surface, this sounds like the right decision, like you're taking the lead. 4th and 7 is a hard one to convert. It's not 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, but the model disagrees.
Yeah, I was actually pretty surprised when I ran this one yesterday during this game, thinking the same thing as you. You're 4th and 7, it's going to be a field goal. But no, it likes the decision to go for it. If this would have been a 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, I would say it would have been a huge error to kick the field goal here. And I am, I'm not certain that Zach Taylor would have kicked the field goal there. He comes in only 18th in our coach rankings, kind of middle of the pack in CCI, but he's been fairly aggressive this year. Now, in this game, he had a 4th and 1 field goal from the 19 early in the game, a 4th and 2 field goal from the 10.
This game was very conservative. Both coaches punted and kicked field goals on 4th and short over and over again throughout this game.
And lately, it seems like both coaches have been like that. They started off with Zach Taylor had the 4th and 1 in week 1 at his own 29, 24, whatever it was, went for it, didn't get it. Minnesota ended up forcing overtime in that one. Shanahan, I always think back to the one with Shanahan a few years ago. He was very aggressive. I think it was the year they made the Super Bowl, lost to the Chiefs. But he had a 4th down. He went for it against I think he went for it against the Falcons, didn't get it, or he didn't go for it. He had been aggressive all year, chose not to go for it, and Atlanta went down, ended up scoring a touchdown to win the game late. That seems like, since then he's kind of stuck to that. Whatever it was in that game, he just kind of flipped the switch and has been pretty conservative throughout the last couple of years. And like you said, both coaches did that in this game. But 4th and 7, yes, that's a tough one to convert. But even if you kick the field goal, you kick off. San Francisco is in a similar position as they would be if you go for it and you don't get it. A touchback puts them at the 25. If you miss this field goal, if you miss the field goal, they're at the 31. If you get it and don't go for it and don't get it, they're at the 23. They're still going to go down and try and get a field goal. Yes, you force them to score a touchdown to win. But even if they go down and kick a field goal, this is something Scott Brown talked about this morning. If they get the field goal, the way overtime works, it's not like you get another quarter after the time runs out. they're going to
Right.
use most of that clock. There's 6.5 minutes left. It's going to take time to get down the field. They're going to try and get it to where if they do have to settle for a field goal, they don't want to leave you much time left to go down and score to win the game. So it is a little kind of questionable maybe on the surface, but the model, is very good. Like in overtime, it's a little bit more difficult, but still it's very good when it comes to these late game and overtime situations on knowing, when to go for it and when not to.
A famous man once said, "You play to win the game. You don't play just
Absolutely.
to tie it. You play to win the game." San Francisco won this game on the ground and with special teams, despite the missed Robbie Gould field goal. Cincinnati actually had the better passing DVOA, but San Francisco was much better on the ground and they were better on special teams. And they took home the win in a game that had huge playoff implications. So the Bengals are now looking on the outside, looking in the crazy AFC playoff race. And the 49ers, I believe, are in the 6th spot in the NFC.
Yeah, they're just ahead. We were looking at that this morning too, the playoffs. They're just ahead of Washington, but I think they're only a game ahead. There are 4 or 5 teams when it's 6 and 7. Even there's a
San Francisco
5 and 8 team.
6.
Yeah, and then you've got Carolina and Seattle at 5 and 8 that are only a couple game or one game out of the 7th spot, a couple games out of that 6th spot. Same with the AFC. It seems like this season is closer later than anyone that I remember. Over the last few years, it's going to come down to the wire.
Seattle is not dead. Like I'm declaring Carolina dead because their quarterback situation is terrible. But Seattle is not dead at 5 and 8. They're not. They could go 8 and 8. They could go 8 and 9 or 9 and 8. 8 and 9 could win that last playoff spot in the NFC.
Yeah, and with Carolina,
I don't think it's just because of the 7th playoff spot that it seems so close this year. Because in the AFC, for example, there are right now 5 teams that are 7 and 6. So 2 of them are currently in playoff position. If we still had only 6 playoff teams, one of them would currently be in playoff position, but you'd still have like an incredibly close race in the AFC, whether there were 6 or 7 playoff teams.
Yeah, and going to the AFC too, you've got, all the way down to the 13th place team, the Dolphins and the Raiders at 13th and 12th are 6 and 7, only a game out of the 6th and 7th spot, 2 games out of 4th and 5th. And you met Carolina, you mentioned, they're still in it, but not only is their quarterback play bad, but they've got 2 games against Tampa Bay. They've got a game against Buffalo. It's going to be hard for them to pull
Yeah,
off.
they have by far the hardest schedule.
But yeah, it'll definitely be fun. It's always fun those last couple of weeks when you've got those crazy playoff scenarios for a team that needs 3 teams to win, 2 teams to lose. They have to win, and then some season you get one of those wherever just the cards just fall perfectly and they get in. It's always fun to follow those last couple of weeks. I think we're going to have a handful of those situations.
Don't forget, if you're watching the show live right now on Monday, please feel free to ask us questions. We're happy to talk about anything from week 14. And don't forget also the updated EdjSports coach rankings coming on Wednesday with Ian and Katie George talking about our rankings of coaches based on how good their teams are, plus how good they've been on 4th downs. Let's move on and talk about the most impactful plays of the week. The plays that had the most impact on the game in terms of win probability, either positive or negative. Speaking of the Carolina Panthers, their quarterback play has been terrible the last couple of weeks, and Cam Newton did a bad thing.
Yes, it was the, I think, second quarter, about halfway through, 3rd and 6 at their own, or at the Atlanta 36, throws an interception, return for a touchdown. It's always going to hurt you. This one cost them 24.7% win probability. Surprisingly, in this one, it did not turn out the way we thought. We actually had Carolina as around a 7-point favorite.
I had Carolina as a heavy favorite in this game. Yep.
So, and I know, Atlanta, it's weird because they've been bottom of the barrel in DVOA, it seems like, the whole season.
They still are. They're 6 and 7.
But they have these games.
And they're still in last place. They only have positive DVOA for 2 games this season. This was their best game of the year.
And their wins have come. Carolina, I know they beat. I think Jacksonville was one of they beat a couple really bad teams that are also
they've beaten garbage.
They're one of those. Yeah, the model doesn't like them, but the last couple weeks or against Tampa Bay, it wasn't really close, but they find a way to have a game like this, like you said, where they come out with Carolina as pretty heavy favorites in our eyes, and 2.5 I think was the closing line on the market. But yeah, this was not good for Carolina. They were tied at the time, and this gave Atlanta a 7-point lead, and kind of didn't really look back from there on. Number
the
4,
only upset of the week, by the way.
This was the only one.
This was the only game of the week where the underdog won the game outright.
That's surprising. Oh, I guess based on the season we've had, it seems pretty surprising. Seems like we've had a lot of them, but
yeah, but this week it was all favorites.
Yeah, and a lot, like you mentioned, a lot of blowouts, games that just were not. It was pretty boring, at least in the early window. But one game that was boring that ended up being really good which comes in at number 4 and number 1. Number 4 was the Baltimore into the game 4th and 6 at their own 45. Would have been awesome to see Justin Tucker come out to attempt a 72 or 73-yard field goal, but instead they went for it, which obviously we thought was the right call. But were not able to convert, dropped them 27.6%, effectively lost the game. Cleveland was able to kneel out the clock. More questionable there, we talked about, was the decision to throw it 2 yards past the line of scrimmage instead of actually past the sticks.
Why? Yeah. Okay. You just said what I was about to say. I don't understand why you do that.
I mean, it is a backup quarterback, Tyler Huntley, which we've accounted for in the game. But I mean, he had the game against Chicago where he led them on the comeback down the field, made some good throws, and yeah, that was questionable. That's a different conversation. But the fact, the execution on the play, the failure to convert was 27.6. Number 30.
The big thing I'm waiting for today is news on Lamar Jackson's injury. I don't know what's going to happen with Lamar Jackson's injury. When I did the playoff odds simulation this morning, I gave Baltimore a 40% chance of Lamar Jackson being out for the season. We have no idea. I have no idea how bad his injury was.
Yeah, I haven't heard much. He obviously didn't come back into play, so it had to have been bad enough, or maybe being precautioned. They were down big at the time. I would still think like we said, every game is a big game from this point out, as close as everyone is. So I would think it's somewhat serious, but man, I don't know. Oh, so we've got a comment about Buffalo, which that brings up an interesting point about.
Let's finish the top 5, and then we'll answer Patrick Seeley's question about the Bills.
Yeah, so number 3 we talked about was the Brashad Perriman touchdown from Tom Brady to win the game. 36% increase, up to obviously 100%. Number 2, Robbie Gould's missed field goal at the end of regulation that would have won it, a 47-yarder, cost them 40.1% in win probability. And just kind of a note on that. So the 40.1% dropped them down to 50.1, and that 50.1 is accounting for the fact that they kicked off in overtime. So it doesn't really average the two, like, okay, if they kick off, if they receive, what is it? It just goes based on the next play. So if they would have gotten the ball, it would have been a little bit less, but still 40% drop there at 90% prior to that kick. And then number 1, the successful onside kick, which doesn't happen often. We've had a handful of them in the last couple of weeks, though, and Chicago had one last night as well. They recovered kind of at a meaningless point of the game, but this one was a 45.8% increase. They were at only 12.1% chance to win prior to that kick, and then jumped up to 57.9. We're favorites based on Justin Tucker's, best in history leg. But they weren't able to come through. But still, the onside kick at that moment in time was worth almost 46%, taking them up, making them favorites at the time at 58%.
So let's talk about Patrick Seeley's question here. Hey, stats guys, that's us. Why is everyone saying that a near 500 team, the Buffalo Bills, had a good game? Do the stats say that running the ball with a running back 0 times and a half is a smart strategy? Okay, let's take this. And then he also asked if Josh Allen actually played a good game, since he had only 3 points with 1 interception in the first half. Okay, let's take each part by itself. First, the Buffalo Bills absolutely had a good game when you consider especially who they played, right? Tampa Bay is number 1 in DVOA for the season. Playing them to overtime, you have played a good game. And Buffalo, look, I know they're 7-6. I've talked about this. They are the second most inconsistent team we've ever measured. They used to be the most inconsistent. Now they're number 2. But if
Who's number one? Just curious.
2005 San Francisco 49ers.
Okay.
If you combine all of Buffalo's play for the year, they are really good. They are still fourth in DVOA overall and fifth in weighted DVOA, which lowers the strength of some of those earlier games where they like clobbered the Houston Texans.
And lost to Pittsburgh.
and lost to Pittsburgh, but clobbered Houston and beat Kansas City, which looks better and better as each week goes on. That win over Kansas City looks better and better.
Yep.
The fact is, if you combine everything together, Buffalo still has the number one defense in the league by our numbers. Like that is, I know they're only 7-6, but if you believe in play-by-play breakdowns and you believe in looking closer at the stats than just the top level wins and losses, Buffalo is a pretty good team. And other stats will tell you the same thing. EPA, I believe, also has Buffalo near the top.
I know we don't adjust for it. How much does losing Tre'Davious White, in your opinion, kind of lower them, or do you still think they're number one in defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it lowers them. I mean, right now, if you said to me, who's the best defense in the league right now, I don't think it's Buffalo. Okay, because especially if you look at weighted defensive DVOA, right? So weighted to recent games, you have New England 1, Dallas 2, Buffalo 3, Arizona 4. And I think with the Tre'Davious White injury, I would drop Buffalo below Arizona. But they're still a pretty good team. And so, yes, Patrick says the 7th seed in the AFC has a top 5 DVOA. Yeah. Like there have been teams that are better than Buffalo that missed the playoffs, starting with Buffalo. The best team to ever miss the playoffs by DVOA was the 2004 Buffalo Bills, and they were over 30% in DVOA. And not only did they miss the playoffs, they weren't even the 7th seed. If there had been 7 playoff teams that year, they still would have missed it. So it is possible to be this high and miss the playoffs, and Buffalo could do it. But I think their schedule gets much easier from now on, except for the Patriots rematch. And I think Buffalo should make the playoffs pretty easily. What do the stats say about not running the ball at all? That is a question for a larger research project. But I think this is one where we have to trust the film people a little bit. That if you never run the ball, the type of blitzes that you can run against that offense are different. You never, ever, if you never, ever, ever have to worry about the run. I mean, they weren't even really running a lot of play action. They had 2 options where I think Allen had the option to hand off, but he didn't hand off. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't try like a draw play. When they did try a draw play in the second half, it worked pretty well. So, I mean, look, this is one of the great debates of analytics. What is the proper pass run ratio? And we all in the analytics world all believe that teams do not pass the ball enough. But whatever is the happy medium is not this. Right? Like it's not this. This is not where the happy medium is 0 runs. Like the happy medium includes some runs. This was extreme.
Yeah, they did end up with 19 rushes, 12 of them by Josh Allen. So
yeah, I mean, mostly by Allen. And by the way, that gets to the next question, which is, did Allen have a good game? He had a bad game passing, but you do have to think about the opponent that he faced as a strong pass defense. He had an amazing game running the ball. He had tons of value running the ball. So did he play a good game? He played a good half. I don't think I would say he played a good game. I'd say he played a good half. I'd say he played an average game. If you combine the bad part with the good part, you get an average game. And whether DVOA, Patrick says, so DVOA doesn't correlate with wins at all. Well, it does correlate with wins. It's just, it's meant to be more predictive than prescriptive, than, descriptive, like it's meant to look at, the real goal of DVOA is to look at the platonic ideal of how good teams are. Okay? So if we lived in this imaginary world where you could put numbers on teams that said how good they really were, like the platonic like ideal of like which team is really better than which team, like that's what we're trying to get at with DVOA. So does that correlate with wins? A lot, but not entirely, right? Like there are teams like Tennessee. Tennessee is 9-4 and 21st in DVOA. And there are teams like Buffalo. Buffalo is 7-6 and 4th. But if you look at the top 10 in DVOA, who is it? It's mostly the teams that are at the top of the playoff race. Tampa, New England, Dallas, Arizona, Rams, Kansas City, Green Bay. So there you go.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of Green Bay a couple of years ago. That in LaFleur's first year, they were 13-3, but went like 6-1 in close games or something that isn't predicted from year to year. And they were low teens, I think, in DVOA most of the year. And as a Packers fan, I sit there, I'm like, what's going on? They're 13-3, but they didn't look good much of the year. They were just found a way to win those close games. I was about to say the same thing for Tennessee.
They didn't look great.
Yeah. And now Tennessee, the Tennessee fans were kind of all over us and you all for our power rankings. DVOA, they're so low, but they were 8-2 or something at the time, and then they lost 2 in a row, and just they really hadn't looked very good all year, and we're just finding a way to win close games. Had the loss to the Jets, and then it's like you said, I agree. Kind of following it, and the more I've understood it as I've kind of been around it a lot more, it's interesting how most of the time the good teams are near the top, but there are always some outliers.
Right. As Chad Reuter says, wins and losses are binary, but DVOA and other statistics cover a spectrum of possibility. And it is possible to play the better game and lose. Like that happens a lot because random bounce of the ball or just how you order your plays, whether you score or not score, how good you are in the red zone. You could play the better overall game and lose. It happens. The question is what predicts which teams are going to be better for the future. So we're trying to do a better job of predicting for the future.
Yeah. Almost if they had like a series of games like in baseball or basketball. It's kind of, I think, a way to look at it too.
Football would be very different if we played 162 of these things instead of 17.
A lot more injuries too.
Lots more injuries. Let's talk about the top 5 coaching decisions of the week.
Coming in at number 5 again on this list is Carolina Panthers, Matt Rule. This one kind of had some trouble with if it should go in here. Every week we pull out obvious goes. Baltimore had the one late that they had to go for. They had no other choice. This was a 4th and 2 at their own 33. They're down 14 with 12 minutes and 18 seconds left. They still have both teams have all 3 of their timeouts. It's a 2.6% increase in win probability, which comes out to, almost a 25% relative increase. But it's a situation where I can see, we talked about it, can see a lot of coaches punting here, saying 12 minutes is a lot of time. It's 14, it's a 12-point deficit, 2 touchdowns. Even if we give up a field goal, it's going to be, 15 point. It's a 2-possession game still. I can see a lot of coaches thinking that way. So we left it in. There really weren't a ton of good goes. You can see our number 1 is only 3%.
Yeah, these are low. These are low percentage.
Yep, we'll see some of them end up in the errors. We already talked about a couple of them. But 3.5 is the highest. That's usually our lowest. That's usually our number 5, if not that number higher at number 5. But nonetheless, Matt Rule made the right decision here to go for it from his own 33. They did convert. Number 4, Ron Rivera, Washington. This was early in the game, right at the end of the first quarter. Had a 4th and 1, 4th and 2 at the Dallas 46. Pretty much a no-brainer. Really not a lot of explanation on this or the next one. Down 11. You're between kind of your own 40, 45, and the opponent's 40. On a 4th and 1 or a 4th and 2, more often than not, that's going to be a go based on what you gain in field position isn't worth as much as a lot of coaches kind of give it credit for. And being a 4th and 2, that's a decision that should go for it, most of the time. We saw Joe Judge punt here last week a ton.
Of course, Joe Judge punted. This is a great example of how you have to judge process separate from results, because Taylor Heineke got sacked for a strip sack fumble. Micah Parsons announcing, yes, I should be considered for Defensive Player of the Year, and returned for a touchdown. So that play sucked for Washington.
Yeah, one of those where you say worst case scenario, you don't get it, whatever. This is the true worst case scenario. You turn the ball over and give up a touchdown. But to your point, the process, the decision to go for it is the right call to give yourself a chance to retain possession there. Number 2 and number 3, I guess we have 2 number 2s. They're tied. We've got Dan Campbell on here again. This one is pretty much a no-brainer for anyone except Bill Belichick or Mike Tomlin or Joe Judge. But 4th and 1 at the 50. Early in the second quarter, 9 minutes left, down 7, you go for it. Campbell's been really good at this all year. The team isn't very good, but they actually did convert this one too. Last week they failed on 2 4th and 1.
Campbell went on a lot of 4th downs because Campbell is not interested in moral victories of losing by a small amount. Campbell was like, you play to win the game. We're trying to win the game. Over and over in this game, he went for it on 4th down, 4th and longs, because he wanted to keep the ball and try to come back rather than reduce the amount that they lost to Denver. So all kudos to Dan Campbell for trying to do that with his crappy roster.
Yeah, and blowouts obviously look bad, but it's not the BCS. You know, you don't get style points for anything. Like you said, they're not going anywhere this year if they haven't been eliminated yet. Maybe they were yesterday. I know there were a couple. The Texans, I think, were the only ones as of last week that got eliminated. But they're, even if they were technically still in the playoff hunt, they weren't going anywhere. So to your point, like, why not go for it? You know, yes, you don't want to. Some people might look at it as him being reckless and saying, you know, this isn't Madden. But in a way, you know, first-year coach, a lot of times they're conservative. He's not. He's been aggressive, taking advantage, kind of getting used to, I guess, getting the players used to this kind of stuff. There's something to be said for that, and just putting trust in your offense kind of for the future. And you said the roster just isn't good. But when you're that big of an underdog in pretty much every game, like, you have no other choice than to keep going for it to try and sneak out a win. And they were able to get one last week. This week wasn't as close. But anyway, kudos to Dan Campbell, who's kind of kept it going for the whole season, except for a couple games there in the middle. Sean Payton, number 2. So he's going to end up on both of these lists. Number 2 was 4th and 1 at the Jets 26, their first possession of the game. This one, again, is a no-brainer. You've got Taysom Hill against the Jets. That offense isn't scaring anyone, especially with a Saints defense that maybe hasn't been as good lately as they were or as they can be. I know they had some people out yesterday. Cameron Jordan was out, maybe a couple other guys. But against the Jets, I mean, you've got to go for that. And he did. It was also 2.9. And then number 1, Matt LaFleur, the 4th and goal and the 2 in the second quarter. That was kind of the start of a crazy, 6 minutes. Ended up being, I think it was 45 points or 40-something points in the second quarter. Was just a crazy sequence, but this was the right call. 4th and goal at the 2 to go for it there. Pretty heavy favorites. They were still, I think, over 50% to win prior to this play, even though they were down 10-0. Early on, they were at 62.2. By going for it, they converted, ended up getting them up to 71% on the conversion. So great call, Matt LaFleur. On that one, I think you said the over hit in the first half with that last.
We were hitting the first half. It was one of my ESPN best bets this week was the over on this game, and it hit in the first half.
I think the second quarter was only 1 point. The second quarter alone was only 1 point shy of the over for the game in total. So yeah, crazy sequence there. Green Bay special teams, absolutely horrible. As a Packers fan, it is unbearable to watch at times. And yesterday was awful.
Dead last in DVOA, even though the muff was nullified and the onside kick doesn't count for DVOA. Still last in DVOA.
Yeah, I guess they're taking over the throne from the Chargers now. They've been, 3 years in a row they've been the worst?
The Chargers have been the worst, yeah.
Yeah. So, hopefully that's one thing too, that the way they give up return, especially yesterday, that's going to cost them a game in the playoffs against a good team. It's tough. But LaFleur, 4th downs, he makes the right call more often than not. There, he's second in our coach rankings. So more of the same for Matt LaFleur.
To answer Patrick Seeley's question quickly, he says, what does a high DVOA team which loses mean? Does it mean the coaching lost the game? It could mean a lot of different things. Different games, it means different things. It could mean the coaching lost the game. It could mean you lost the game on the kind of random variation plays that aren't included in DVOA, like fumble recovery luck or onside kicks or, blocked punts returned for touchdowns and such. It could mean just you had bad sequencing of your plays. Like you played really well until you got to the 20 and then you were really bad in the red zone. So you had to kick field goals and the other team just happened to be really good in the red zone on the 2 drives where they actually moved the ball and therefore they won the game, even though for most of the game they weren't moving the ball at all and you were. There's a lot of different reasons why a team with the higher DVOA for the game loses the game. It could mean a lot of different things. Let's talk about the worst coaching decisions of the week. And Sean Payton will show up on this list too.
Yeah, a couple times. So number 5 was a 4th and 1 at his own 34 early in the game. Not ones we see a lot of coaches go for, other than, mentioned Dan Campbell has done it a couple times. Zach Taylor did it early in the season. Sean Payton, so he was really good. You think of him as very analytical. He was good until last year. We actually looked it up during the podcast we did earlier because just kind of trying to get his ranks. A couple years ago, he was up there. Last year, he was dead last in CCI, which is our 4th down decision-making metric. This
which is
year,
crazy. Historically, he's very aggressive.
Exactly. And this year, he's still up there in the top 10. He is at 9th. Only 12th in CCI. I imagine he's going to drop a little bit after this week. Maybe not too far because he did have the good decision. These, are, this one is a smaller error. But when we get to that top one, he's definitely going to drop. I would be surprised if he doesn't. But this one, your own 34 again. Taysom Hill, the Saints. Alvin Kamara is back. You're playing the Jets. It's early in the game. You don't get it. I mean, yes, they're in field goal range, but it's already a long field goal range. No one's really scared of that offense. They're not, Zach Wilson's back out there. They're last in offense, I think, in DVOA. Really,
Zach Wilson's been terrible this year, but they're not last in offense in DVOA because Mike White and Joe Flacco played so much better than Zach Wilson.
So with Zach Wilson, though, like you said, he's been awful. So really no reason not to go for it there. Number 4, I guess these two are tied for number 4. Mike McCarthy. This one's a little bit more questionable from the outside looking in. They're up 7, 4th and 3 on their own 20 with 3:16 left. This is a 3.3% error. This is right after the pick 6 that Prescott threw. An argument that I'm sure we're going to get is that Washington had all the momentum at this point. Go for it, this and that. But this is a very similar situation to the Detroit one last week. Even if you don't get it, yes, they're in field goal range, but they need a touchdown to tie or to take the lead if they go for 2. So worst case scenario is they score an extra point. I guess the real worst case is they go for 2 and they get it. Dallas still has 2 timeouts, 3 minutes left, a 2-minute warning. Chances are they're going to have enough time, only needing a field goal to win that game. So with that offense too that Dallas has, the Washington defense has been better of late, but with that offense, you've got to be confident that you're going to get those 3 yards. And it's just time's running out. If you punt the ball away and Washington goes down, and if they're going to score a touchdown, extra point, they're probably going to take up the whole clock. If they force overtime, then you're at the mercy of the coin flip. If they go for 2, that's another play you got to defend. That's close to a 50-50 shot at converting that to win the game. So this is just one where coaches still haven't come around to this one, that late in the game in their own territory. They don't really put a whole lot of stock into the fact that, hey, yes, they're already in scoring range, but it's going to be a quick score if they score at all. And you can still trust your defense to get a stop and force them into 4 downs, get the stop on 4th down, and then the clock's pretty much gone at that point anyway. So still a little bit questionable for people, maybe that aren't so analytically minded or who are anti-analytics, but all in all, it's the right call. Again, it's a small error, 3.3%. We're not saying they lose by punting here. They're still at 86% chance to win by punting, 89 by going for it. They're still going to win over 4 out of 5 times anyway. It's just going for it based on the conversion rates and based on their offensive strengths is the better option because they're going to convert that more often than they're not. Number 3, we covered Zach Taylor, 4th and 7 from the San Francisco 23 in overtime. It's a 4.5% decrease win probability. We covered number 2 as well, 49ers 4th and 2 at their own 37 late. very similar situation to the Cowboys. They're up 7 late in the game. Just keeping the ball in your hands, not giving the other team an opportunity to even try and tie it up. Just try and run that clock out as best as you can. It's 5.2. And then the Sean Payton, this one was very surprising to me. It's 4th and 2 on the Jets 8 at the end of the third quarter. They're up 4. A field goal puts you up 3, or puts you up 7. Sorry, gets you 3 points, puts you up 7. Okay, you kick off, whatever. It's the Jets. If you go for it and don't get it, they're on their own 8. That's prime, pressure. How often do you see, those 15-yard pick sixes where they kind of throw it out in the flat, takes it back? You're in a really good situation on an inexperienced quarterback to get pressure on him and make him make a mistake. If not, you're making him go 92 yards to get a touchdown to take the lead or to get into field goal range. They're still down 1 if they kick a field goal. There's a whole quarter left. There's going to be a lot of time for you to make that up. So with Sean Payton there, just this one was very surprising. I thought for sure he was going to go for it. He actually took the delay of game to move back on the field goal than to go for it. So you'd rather lose 5 yards than attempt to pick up the first down. 5 yards that close to a field goal isn't a huge difference. Doesn't really hurt you as much, but it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
All right, let's talk about Monday Night Football. Let's preview Monday Night Football a little bit here. We've got Rams and Cardinals, the big NFC West showdown tonight. It says here in my notes that the Cardinals are favored by 2, but that would be a change. I thought it was 3. So hold on, and I'm checking. No, it's 2.5. Cardinals are favored by 2.5 in this game tonight. Cardinals are currently 5th in DVOA, and the Rams are 6th. So, that includes Colt McCoy, though. So, Cardinals are a little bit better than the Rams if you adjust for, the idea that they have Kyler Murray back.
Yeah, both top 6 defenses. I know I saw your tweet from last week about, with Kyler, they're 7th in DVOA. I think they're like 19th with Colt McCoy. It comes out to 12th.
If the offense doesn't include the McCoy games, they would be 3rd in DVOA last week. Yeah.
So yeah, you've got 2 top 6 defenses, 2 top 5 offenses, again, top 5 or 6 overall. Really good game. You mentioned the market now at 2.5. That's moved a little bit. We actually have this as a 4-point game in favor of Arizona. I think partially, as we've talked about, we've got a little bit of a home field advantage factor in there, although was that this morning you tweeted out about the record for home versus away?
Yeah, home teams are 500 this year.
So maybe there's something to that.
A little less than 500 because that includes 2 games in London.
Okay. So yeah, it'll be interesting. That's something that to look into. Definitely, I know we've had those conversations, but as it is right now, we've got that baked in a little bit. 4-point game, so a little bit over a field goal, so it's pretty strong. We're at 65% win probability for Arizona. And at a 2.5-point spread, that's about a 59% chance to cover. What the part that really surprised me about this game is the over or under. The total here is at 51 points. As a individual, I'm not surprised. Our model has this as a 47-point total. So to stay under 51 points. So to go 50 or below, we've got it at just under 60% of our simulations. It stays under 51. This one is kind of giving me vibes of the Kansas City, Los Angeles Rams Monday Night Football game a couple years ago that I could easily see being an 80, 90-point total. There are 2 really good defenses, but it just seems like the offenses, we know how good they are, how powerful they are, that a couple, turnovers here and there, maybe a couple pick sixes from the defenses are setting them up in good field goal or in good field position and some quick strikes. It seems like this could be, I would take the over if it were me, but we like the under a little bit more as a company at EdjSports in our model. A little surprising to me, though.
I will point out that the Arizona offense is 2nd and the Rams defense is 30th on short middle passes. First time these teams played, those passes mostly went to Max Williams, who is now injured. So maybe this is a big Zach Ertz game. Also, the Cardinals defense is sort of weak against wide receiver 3s, and Van Jefferson had 90 yards and a touchdown in the first meeting of these teams. So maybe a good Van Jefferson game. The Rams kick ass in ESPN's trench stats. They lead the league in pass rush win rate and run stop win rate, and the offensive line is 2nd in pass block win rate and 5th in run block win rate. The Cardinals are lower in these stats, but they're still above average. But the Rams are definitely the dominating team in the trenches. So I actually, if a gun was to my head and I was forced to make a pick, I would go with Rams plus 2.5. But I mean, I like the Cardinals slightly to win overall, and I think this is a very close matchup.
Yeah, the market, we've got the public money, 52% of the bets are on the Rams, 62% of the money as of now. So that's really close, a little bit more of the money on LA. I'm kind of with you. I think it's going to be really close. It should be. They did a good job for once scheduling. Or we've had some good Monday night games, but should be a really good game to cap the week, the final week of buys. Next week we'll have everyone back in action. But just hoping for a good game, not a blowout. If it's going to be, no defense in a high-scoring game, or good defense and a fairly low-scoring but close, would expect that. It's the last couple times with the Rams on, prime time. I don't know how much stock to really put into that, but the Titans game, the Packers game was, I don't know if it's really a prime time. They were 4:30, but it was the national game. They've come out kind of flat, so it'll be interesting to see. They had the big win last week, but it was Jacksonville. So interesting
poke,
there.
Poke.
But
wake up, guys! Make this a good game. Let's do it. Come on, poke.
Good. Both of these teams should be. I know this is the one. The Cardinals can be the first to clinch the playoffs, I believe, too, with a win tonight. That's all they had the easiest path this week, just to win, and they're in.
All right. Thanks, folks, for joining us. Don't forget, we live stream on YouTube and Twitch, Twitter and Facebook, and in the widget in the corner of the website every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Scott Spratt and Derek Klassen will be here tomorrow to talk fantasy football, and Wednesday it's Mike Panier and I believe JP Acosta. And then Thursday we're going to have Seth Kaiser, who is a Kansas City Chiefs analyst, to talk about whether the Chiefs really are the favorite in the AFC at this point. Don't forget that all the shows are available after the fact on the Football Outsiders podcast network, so you can listen to them like in your car or while you work out. And don't forget, as I mentioned at the top of the show, FO Plus on sale, 99 cents a week for an annual subscription. It's a limited time offer that gets you all of our stats and analysis, fantasy and betting information. Do not miss out. FootballOutsiders.com/subscribe. Ian, thank you as always for joining me on Monday. Everybody enjoy Monday Night Football, and Scott Spratt will be here with you tomorrow at Tuesday. I will talk to you on Wednesday. Take care, everybody.